Lisa Witter, and I'm here to help you to awaken to the true you. Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode. And I'm looking down because I'm looking at a book that I have a lot of writing in. As you can see, a lot of underlines and bookmarks and all types of stuff in here, because I want to talk about today a lesson that's in this book. It's called The Journey to Self-Realization by Paramhansa Yogananda. And I personally follow the teachings of Yogananda and the lineage of Yogananda, and I've just found it profoundly valuable on my spiritual path. I have a very interesting story how I came across the works of Paramhansa Yogananda. I'm sure, I don't know how many of you here who are watching this or listening to this have read his book, Autobiography of a Yogi, but it's a super popular book, so I wouldn't be surprised if you've read it before. It became really popular, I think, in the 60s, with the Beatles all read the book, and it's just been one of those spiritual classics over time that many people have read, regardless of spiritual tradition or ethnicity or anything like that. So but what I want to talk to you about is one of his teachings, and I love this book because it's his collected teachings. It's actually the teachings in here, as I'm looking, my eyes, you guys, I'm needing reading glasses here. The teachings in this book are actual sermons or lectures that he gave. So the one that I'm going to talk to you about today, actually it says that he gave this talk at the First Self-Realization Fellowship Temple in Encinitas, California on February 13th, 1938. And I used to live right down the street from that temple in Encinitas, and I would visit it all the time. It was just such an amazing place. But what he talks about in this sermon are these 3 ways to arrive at the truth. And for those of you who've been with me for any length of time know that really what I focus on is how do we arrive at understanding the true you, or our true selves, and the true nature of reality, and what are the practices that we need to instill and cultivate in our daily lives in order to find out that truth of who we are. So what Yogananda says is that there are 3 ways. Again, I'm reading from the book. Specifically, he says there are 3 ways of arriving at the truth: through our sense perception, through inference, and through intuition. And he says that if your sense perception is wrong, your inference is wrong. That makes sense. So he says, looking at the horizon, you may think that there is a fire because you see smoke. But as you approach the site, you find it was just a cloud of dust. In order to apprehend the truth of anything, he says, you depend on your sight, your hearing, your smell, your taste or touch, plus the power of your mind. These, however, could not be ultimate proof of the truth, because if the senses lie, the mind will lie. Your mind draws its conclusions from what the senses perceive, and the senses are extremely limited. So I'm going to pause there for a second, because it's very important to get the gravitas of what I just read in that piece. And that is to say that in our everyday life, most of us, even if we're spiritual seekers, we depend on our senses in order to discern the truth. We depend on what we hear, what we see, what we think, what we touch. And then it's our mind, our rational mind, our reasoning that helps us to discern what the truth is. But what if our senses are actually not perceiving the truth, which is the example that he gives of us thinking we're looking in the horizon and thinking that it's a fire in the horizon when really it's just a huge dust cloud. All right. So now this is where I think a lot of spiritual seekers go wrong and sort of get lost on the path for a bit, is that they don't do this one thing that I'm now going to read about that he suggests. So he says, so how are you going to find the truth? Right? How are you going to find the truth? The reality that lies behind what the senses perceive. You cannot do it by your rational mind because your mind falls victim to the senses. It only infers about what the senses tell it. Right? Okay, we got that. That's easy enough to get. He says, the mind, therefore, does not comprehend the infinite forces that are dancing all around. Only, now here's the key right here, only by the development of intuition can you know what is truth. Intuition is direct perception. It is the all-knowing, pure comprehension of the soul. I'm going to pause there for a second because this is where I have experienced myself being a spiritual seeker. Literally my entire life is young as I can remember. You guys, I've told the story of being a little kid and, you know, my mom, not religious at all, no spiritual tradition at all. And I was going to church by myself because I was drawn there. So I feel like I've been a spiritual seeker my entire life. And this piece about intuition and understanding the truth through our own intuition is key, because I know for myself along the path, especially when I was younger, in my 20s and even in my 30s, I often went and I would go to I remember going into the bookstores back then, the metaphysical bookstores where they sold, all the cool metaphysical books. Back then it was like these little cute, I thought of them as cute bookstores that smelled like incense or essential oils, and they had the candles going on. We've sort of lost a lot of those stores now because we have Amazon and we can get all of our books on Amazon. But I used to love to go into these stores, and oftentimes in these stores, I would say not even oftentimes, every single one of those types of metaphysical bookstores has people there who will do card readings, like tarot readings or palm reading or intuitive readings. And literally there was this point in my life where I would weekly go into this one particular bookstore and get my cards read, because I was going through such a tumultuous time. I was in my mid-20s. I had just broken up with a boyfriend, and I was at a complete loss. I was completely devastated. I was on the brink right then of being suicidal. And so I was relying on getting tarot card readings literally on a weekly basis. And honestly, they made me more confused after a while because I was working with different people. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, you guys. And I wasn't relying on my own intuition in order to perceive the truth. I was relying on someone or something outside of me. I was doing pendulums all the time. Now, I am in no way dissing any of this because I think all of it is super valuable. But if you put all of your faith into someone else giving you information, doing readings for you, a pendulum or whatever it is, you're not relying on your own intuition. So now I'm going to go back to what he says. He says, again, this is from Yogananda. He says, errors in judgment are a result of not having developed intuition. To progress and avoid the misery of mistakes, you have to find what is the truth in everything. He says this is possible only if you develop your intuition. That is the practical truth of the matter. That is why I am asking you to cultivate and use intuitive power in everything, in your relationships with others, in your business, in your married life, in every part of your life. Intuition is essential. Now, what I like what he does here is he describes what happens if you're not using your intuition, your own faculty of intuition, versus relying on someone else's intuition or advice. By not developing the faculty of intuition, you make wrong decisions. Not so good. You pick up wrong business associates. I've done that. Hello. I've had that happen to me a couple times. You get caught up in wrong personal relationships. Let's see, has that ever happened to me before? I think so. Okay. Since the judgment of your mind is conditioned by the information fed to it by the senses, if your senses become diluted, you may think a person is wonderful without knowing what he truly is inside. You may think you found your soulmate, so you may enter into matrimony and then end up in divorce court. But the intuition will never make such a mistake. It will not look at the magnetic power of the eyes or the attractive face or personality of a person, but will feel and perceive accurately in the heart what that person is really like. By the power, and then I'm going to fast forward. He says, many people lacking intuition put a lot of money into financial prospects that do not produce anything, and consequently, they lose everything. And he says, that he's been successful because he had developed his power of intuition. So I want to fast forward for myself, and then I'll get to the final point of this piece on, you're really, for those of us that are spiritual seekers, we have to develop that intuition. As I became older and wiser, and I do by no means think that I am, enlightened or, the wisest person on earth, but I'm definitely much wiser now than I was when I was 25 or even 35. So, as I started to cultivate my own intuition, I began to get a deep felt understanding of what was right and what was wrong in particular situations or in relationship to particular people. The outer circumstances of a situation for me could look one way, but I could trust that my intuition was right. If for instance, the outer situation looked one way, but my intuition was like, I know it looks like that, but there's something that doesn't smell quite right here. And trusting that intuition has gotten me out of several jams, I have to say. So how do we cultivate intuition? Well, if you're following the path of yoga, then that way to cultivate the intuition is through meditation. And I think that it's the most, I'm a firm believer in meditation. It's been taught by the ancients for millennia, and it's been proven over and over and over again that if you can really cultivate your ability to meditate at a deep level, you will also begin to develop true perception. You'll be able to see the truth clearly beyond your senses. One of the biggest pieces of meditation is this idea. The very first thing you learn in meditation is how to withdraw your attention from the outer world and bring it inside. So we pull our senses inward and we begin to develop that sense perception from within. So so to sort of recap everything here, one of the biggest things that most spiritual seekers learn a little bit late on the path, I don't think anything is ever really too late, but they learn late on the path, is to not rely on someone else's intuition, to not rely on getting readings all the time and getting your cards read, or trusting the pendulum, or whatever other rituals there might be. Those are all good, but if you're relying on those and not relying on your own intuition, and working, practicing on developing your own intuition, perceiving the truth of not only of who you truly are and your true self, but perceiving the truth of the situation and circumstances that you're in right now, is going to be very, very challenging, and maybe lead you, as Yogananda said, into some situations that may have looked good from the outside, but if you had had developed a sense of intuition, would not have led you down that road. So that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. If you liked this episode, please do like it, share it, comment below this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can get notifications on my updates, on my downloads of videos that I post quite often. And feel free to follow me over on Facebook at Lisa Witter. Thank you so much, and namaste.